Good evening. This is Maestro Cretella with a DoW2 Retribution Codex Edition cast. Today we have a 1v1 on Greentooth Gorge. Our first player today is a FaceCommander, playing as the Autarch, now as a hero in the game. Pretty much, they actually made an entirely different model for him, or her, I'm not even sure which. It still has the Warp Spider Exarch voice, and it still says Warp Spider Exarch voice, but this is the Autarch as a hero. FaceCommander is playing against none other than Maestro Cretella as Sindri, Trollface, Chaos Sorcerer, or the Sorcerer Lord of Tzeentch, as he's called in this. So, I'm pretty busy coming up. Right now I just finished my 6th day of work in a row without a day off, and I'm on track to do 13. Also starting graduate school on Thursday, but I'm still going to try to bring as many Dawn of War 2 as well as a few Company of Heroes casts, basically just as much as I can, nevertheless. So this is me playing as the Sorcerer in Codex Edition. He has been changed a bit. His model has not been changed. It's still good old Sindri right here, or technically good old Neroth from Dawn of War 2 Retribution. But he has been reworked. Unlike the other Chaos Heroes had a model change, the Sorcerer did not, but he has been reworked a bit. Still has most of the same abilities, but different configurations for them, different warrior slots, different warriors in general. And he's also picked up some new abilities, and he actually doesn't have some abilities that he used to have. For example, the Sorcerer can no longer get Subjugation. He can, however, get Let the Galaxy Burn. And you can also have some combinations that you couldn't have before. Like you can actually have both Teleport, the Sorcerer's personal teleport, as well as Chains of Torment. And also the warrior that provides the personal teleport for the Sorcerer also provides the Warp Rift ability from the Sigil of the Rift. So right here, unfortunately, the early positioning is a little bit difficult right here for me playing as Chaos against Eldar in the Codex Edition, in part because I have this Cultist squad that I'm using pretty much just as map control, because they seem to be borderline useless for actual fighting purposes. And right now I'm also just getting rushed a lot by melee units. Now I was at least able to put my Chaos Space Marines in the building, so since FaceCommander had already used his grenades, it looked like he used 2, or maybe I threw a grenade and he threw 1 as well. But I knew that I could. No, apparently I didn't, but I'm using it now. But I was able to put my Chaos Space Marines pretty safely in this garrison because I knew that the grenades for these Dire Avengers was on cooldown. So if we take a look at our starting units, we still have these cultists for me, these Chaos Cultists instead of Chaos Heretics. They now start out with auto guns, and they start out as ranged rather than melee. You can upgrade them so that they can become melee, but for the most part they seem pretty bad, and what's said about them, or what I was told about them, is that they're really just supposed to function as basically fodder, as a meat shield, and not even really supposed to be that good. But that just leaves me in a pretty precarious position where most of the other races actually have a starting unit that is actually very capable, such as these Dire Avengers. I'm getting cultists, which don't seem to do much unless you upgrade them a bit. So I'm pretty much just using them as I've been using them as map control, and I did have an early advantage in map control, at least for the resource points, but not the VPs. Now there, my Sorcerer was fighting the Autarch, and he seemed to be winning until the Autarch used some kind of ability that took just half of the Sorcerer's health. And I'm guessing that's coming from this warrior. It's called the Shard of Anaris. And it says something like it can deliver a sudden fatal shock to enemy units. So that must be some kind of ability that comes with this War Gear upgrade that just allows it to do very high damage to a single target, which is something that could potentially be very powerful, since it would be an easy model pick on a lot of high-value squads like something like these tactical CSMs or the Raptors. And meanwhile, would be even better than that would be sniping heroes. Now there he used it on my Sorcerer when the Sorcerer had high health, and there again we just saw a model instantly sniped. But I think even better would be if he had that, used that in a situation where my Sorcerer was at less than half health. Probably would have just taken out the Sorcerer, and then I would have to rebuy him. But, so the FaceCommander has gotten a squad of Striking Scorpions. These are now the Tier 1 melee unit for Eldar, and we see an Autarch there with that special little headdress. They kind of not exactly replace Howling Banshees, because you can still get Howling Banshees in Tier 2, but I guess they replace them in Tier 1. Basically, this is Eldar's Tier 1 melee unit, and you can get Howling Banshees in Tier 2. We also have a Seer Council in Tier 1. They're kind of like a secondary commander, a sub-commander, similar to the Apothecary and Tech Marine squads. They can be upgraded with several things, Singing Spears. I believe they also have a heal ability that seems to be very useful, and you can also upgrade to have just more members. It can go from, starts out at 3 and can be upgraded to as much as 5 Warlocks. Unfortunately, my Havoc's not set up in a good position. I set them up to suppress those Striking Scorpions, but they got flanked by the Autarch. Autarch is also upgraded to have the Shadow Hunter's Gift. He apparently puts on Striking Scorpion armor, and that allows him to infiltrate. And that's going to be pretty tough for me, because as we can see, these Striking Scorpions are also infiltrated. And I'm not even sure what my detector options are for Chaos in Codex Edition. I have my Cultists right here. Right now they don't detect. And I'm also having trouble with the fact that right now FaceCommander definitely has melee superiority with between the Striking Scorpions, that Autarch, and this Autarch he's obviously a new hero that they've kind of built from the ground up, totally new war gears. They're not adjusting an existing hero, they're creating an entirely new hero. And with that, I feel like they're having it's just a little more trouble balancing something that you're creating entirely from the ground up than something that already exists and you're just adjusting it. So this Autarch right now, he seems to be doing a few too many things and is good at a few too many things. Both has a combination of, he seems to be performing both like an offensive commander in just how powerful he is as a fighter, as well as having a lot of like disruption and disabling and control abilities that are very effective. So Cultists are still on map control duty and still not winning any fights whatsoever. So I'm generally winning on resource map control, but I'm having a little bit of trouble on VPs. I'm prioritizing the resources, but still having trouble on VPs. Managed to actually force off the Seer Council by the use of my Havoc. But again, I still have nothing to detect these Striking Scorpions whatsoever, and I'm not even sure what to detect them, or the Autarch himself. Meanwhile, So this opening is a little tricky. Now for the Sorcerer, I have gotten some upgrades on him. One thing that I didn't mention is that the Sorcerer only starts with Doom Bolts. And what that means is that he does not start with Consume. So when in his vanilla form in Codex Edition, pretty much basically what you have is just the single cast of Doom Bolts. And then you're just kind of waiting for that to go off cooldown. Unlike, obviously, you can't do a lot of the rapid-fire Doom Bolts. Doom Bolts as a spell is still very powerful, as you can see right there. But you can't do it many, many times like you would be able to in Retail or Elite. So there I used some Chains of Torment. It seems to be... Yeah, I used some Chains of Torment, but again, right there I got hit by that ability from the Autarch, doing a huge amount of burst damage to the Sorcerer, and I just have to get him out of there or I'm gonna risk losing him. As it is, I guess I'm pretty lucky that FaceCommander hasn't used that at a time when my Sorcerer's actually at low health. He's using it when I have high health, and then my Sorcerer's nearly dead. So I have some Havocs right here. They, of course, have two... What? No, they lost one of their Heavy Bolters. So that must be a little bit of a bug, but they start out with 2 Heavy Bolters, but I guess just something with the reinforcement hasn't entirely been adjusted to work out. But they would normally start out with 2 Heavy Bolters and have any heavy weapon. Right now they only have 1, which I think is just some kind of oversight, something that hasn't been fully adjusted because of the fact that they did not get 2 heavy weapons in Retail or Elite. So right here, I also actually have a Flamer on my Tactical CSM Combat Squad. And you can see that they're not really doing quite as good a job of bashing generators as a Flamer would in Retail or Elite. Still definitely still one of the better things you can get for bashing generators, but in general, generator bashing, it's a little harder to do. You have to commit a little more heavily to it. You need to commit more units to it. And you don't have as much ability to wipe an entire gen farm from a single unit. Alright, so now we have a Chaos Dreadnought out on the field, exploding some of these Striking Scorpion models. This Chaos Dreadnought has been changed a bit in Elite, and now starts with a heavy, twin-linked Heavy Bolter. And I believe that heavy bolter can suppress. Now here I have upgraded my heretics or my cultists. They are now Chaos Mutants. They are now in a melee form. They have an Aspiring Champion, and they also can Doom Blast. Although for some reason they actually cannot worship. Although I think that might just be an oversight and a mistake that will probably be changed. So I have that Dreadnought right now, just kind of standing around. I'm not sure why. I might just be waiting for the full support of having most of my units. I also have some of my units. Now, what I have is a Dreadnought charging in to these, because I imagine that the Dreadnought's going to have a bit of an advantage over things like the Seer Council and the Autarch, and hoping that I can just kind of charge and force them off easily. Now, the Wraithlord, again, just about every unit that has weapon upgrades has many more weapon upgrades than it does in Retail or Elite. So here we have a Wraithlord now with a missile launcher. And I'm pressing a little bit with my forces. Now, I also tried upgrading my Raptors to have a Power Fist. Right now, it does not appear that that upgrade has been successful. Not entirely sure what's up with that. Could just be a little bug. What else do I got going on? I'm getting an Aspiring Champion on the Raptors. I already have an Aspiring Champion on the Tactical CSMs, and I also have an Aspiring Champion on my Havocs, but they are way out of position. And now, unfortunately, I also have my Dreadnought in a bad position. It has been upgraded to an autocannon, but it's taking more damage for some reason than the Wraithlord, and it doesn't look like I'm going to get it out of here. Alright. So also going to throw a Melt-A-Bomb on this Wraithlord, but it doesn't necessarily look like I'm going to come out of this fight in a really good position. Bleeding a few too many Raptor models. Actually lost the Aspiring Champion. So I lost my Dreadnought. Meanwhile, he's still got the Wraithlord. Definitely lost that engagement pretty much, although I've got the Cultists on map control. Actually, I have them doing nothing. They're supposed to be on map control duty, but they're doing nothing. And there are definitely times when I'm dropping my micro in this game, in part just because there are times when I honestly don't know what the hell to do. But this can't quite be a good situation. At least the Cultists now, they actually have a sound effect for their guns. And they not only have a sound effect, but an animation for their guns, as opposed to Retail and Elite, where they are actually shooting very negligible damage, but they have no sound effect and no animation for their guns. So I've gotten some missile launchers on my Havoc squad. Now they do have 2 heavy weapons. I do also have an Aspiring Champion on them. Now I chose to get the missile launchers in part. Now, actually, the Aspiring Champion, he's the one with the bolter with the bayonet and the Aspiring Champion helmet. I chose to get the missile launchers. I wanted something for AV to deal with that Wraithlord, but I wanted to keep them a little more mobile, and they also get a frag missile upgrade that's actually helpful as anti-infantry. A frag missile ability. I think I said an upgrade. Now these fire dragons right here, there's something where in the moment I did not realize just how incredibly effective they were, but at least right now they're very, very powerful against vehicles. Alright, and one of the things I'm having a little bit of trouble with, and part of why I'm trying to do those Chains of Torment, is the fact that FaceCommander's being really, really aggressive with all of his units. Luckily this Flamer is actually pretty good as anti-infantry. And I think I'm at least going to force off these Striking Scorpions. Got a Doom Blast from behind. Striking Scorpions at very, very low health. The Wraithlord also low, but decides to use its charge to get out of there. And I might even take out the Striking Scorpions. They even upgraded to the Scorpion's Claw, a heavy melee weapon for the Exarch. But I might even kill the Striking Scorpions. And I did do a Dark Flames Global to try to just finish them off, but what ended up not even being necessary. So at least that time, I had a few victories. I have a new Dreadnought now out on the field. And although I didn't take out the Wraith Lord, I at least got rid of one of his squads, and one of his melee squads, importantly, since I'm definitely struggling a little bit on how aggressive FaceCommander's being with his melee units. And now we can see here we have 2 missile launchers shooting at this power node, and definitely not bashing as quickly as missile launchers would in retail or elite. So in general, power bashing seems to have been toned down a bit in the Codex edition.
We are losing a power node to the enemy.
So if we take a look at our tactical CSM, we also have, again, that aspiring champion right there. He's got the power sword as well as the bolt pistol. And now we have some Howling Banshees out, 6 of them. This time I decided to try to put a missile launcher in the Chaos Dreadnought. And, oh, there I went for Chains of Torment, and the central mass got shot down really quickly. Now let's take a look at just at how quickly this Dreadnought gets shot down by those Fire Dragons. That was, I think, purely the Fire Dragons. That was all the Fire Dragons. So they can, it appears they can pretty easily solo vehicles. They get a Melt-A-Bomb and then just follow up with their weapons. So, yeah. And in the moment, like, I didn't even realize what was taking out my Dreadnought. In part because I wasn't expecting these Fire Dragons to be as good as they are. So here I have some Heretics fighting, or some Cultists, or some Chaos Mutants. And I'm trying to have them fight the Banshees, but one of the things that you can see here that's been changed about the Banshees that definitely makes them better is that their Warshout stuns instead of suppresses. So, whereas Heretics against Banshees is kind of questionable, kind of a question mark in retail and elite, where it's kind of depends on a lot of factors and not always sure who wins that. Here, I'd say it probably just straight up goes to the Banshees because they can stun, which sounds like a very powerful ability. Meanwhile, this Exarch is also being very powerful, or this Autarch, and he himself, or she himself, can also get a Banshee Exarch mask. And let's see if okay, so it's not actually equipped on the model, but that just gives the Exarch a stun ability, which is going to turn out to be very powerful. That was actually the frag missile that we saw right there, followed by some Doom Bolts. But the Autarch also has, this has improved warp generator, but this is still from the original tooltip, or even from the advanced retail tooltip. But this is actually allowing the Autarch to teleport. So he can teleport right in and then instantly stun any one of my units, and can actually stun many of my units if I have them blobbed up a little too much. So I've actually, with my Sorcerer, I've given up on Chains of Torment, and I've actually switched out for Let the Galaxy Burn, combined with Doom Bolts and now the Rod of Warpfire. I have 3 offensive spells, and I can use all 3 of them. I can actually use all 3 of them with this energy pool. So I can use all 3 of them in quick succession, and yeah, I can just use all 3. So I kind of have a ranged ability spam build for this Sorcerer Lord of Tzeentch. I'm not sure how actually good it is. Doom Bolts definitely seems to have been scaled up to the different health values of Codex Edition. I mean, just if you notice all the squads, they generally just have higher health than units in general in retail and elite. So Doom Bolt seems to have been scaled up for that, to do more, basically just to do more damage so that it's still a good spell. I feel like Let the Galaxy Burn hasn't as much, but it's been hard to tell just because, again, FaceCommander has been really aggressive that at times he's kind of running past the spell. And here we have that Autarch teleporting in and stunning some of my units, making it a little bit harder to win fights. But there was that frag missile again. Unfortunately, I have the Raptors here, and they are just losing to a bunch of stuff. I'm not even sure what, but they just lost, and I lost my Raptors, lost something else. I definitely lost my Dreadnought at some point. I think I had already lost it. But I lost that engagement quite significantly. But as you can see right there, the Sorcerer was casting Doom Bolts, and that's still a very, very good spell, doing a ton of damage to these Dire Avengers. And I'm now in a not a very strong position, just having lost 2 units. And I haven't been taking out FaceCommander's units at this point. And one of the things that's become really challenging is especially this Autarch. Again, I feel the Autarch might be doing a few too many things too well. Right now he still has that ability that's kind of doing a high burst damage to a single model, one-shotting models from squads, or possibly even forcing my Sorcerer off very early, or potentially even killing him entirely. As well as right now teleporting. Teleporting combined with an ability that stuns a squad or multiple squads if I'm blobbing. Here I tried to go for a wipe on that secondary HQ choice, the Seer Council. Although these Chaos Mutants, they do seem to be at least better in the sense that at least better than the starting cultists. In part because they actually seem to have a lot of health. So these aren't squishy heretics. They've got quite a bit of health. But anyway, I'm going for a Great Unclean One, and one of the things we can see about the Great Unclean One, if you look here, is that it actually costs red, which if you think about it kind of makes sense. We're summoning a demon, so it requires Chaos Favor. But I'm low on units, and I'm not even necessarily sure how good this Great Unclean One is. It's my first time buying one in the Codex edition. And there I lose my Sorcerer. And again, these Chaos Mutants couldn't do anything to that Howling Banshee squad because of the fact that they got stunned. Buy my Sorcerer back, have the Great Unclean One on the way. Unfortunately, that cuts into my plans to use an Imperial Abyss, although it's still not too far away. One of the things that definitely hasn't quite been adjusted is that you get a lot more red in Codex Edition than in Retail or Elite. Just more things die, so you get more red. But the cost of globals has not really been adjusted in consideration of that. So you can definitely do more nukes in Codex Edition than you can in Retail or Elite, because you're just going to get more red. And here we see that ability again, just teleporting straight to my units. And since I had two of them bunched up, two of them blobbing, was able to just take them both out, or to stun them. I tried to follow it up with an Eldritch Storm. Luckily, it didn't really work out. But still, even though the Eldritch Storm didn't work out, the power of having this Autarch, just being able to teleport in and stun a unit, is something that's going to be very, very powerful. I mean, we're not talking about teleporting in and tying up a unit. We're talking about teleporting a unit in and stunning it, which is, like, again, a much more powerful ability. Because you're just instantly taking out any squad you want. Instantly taking any squad out of the fight for just a little while, or more than one if your opponent has them blobbed. And just because compared to tying up a unit, sometimes you can try to tie up a unit with a commander, but you might not. The commander might not win against that unit, especially if it's something very powerful. A stun is good for just about any kind of unit, or anything that's vulnerable to a stun, which is any kind of infantry. A little too much bunching and blobbing right here, but luckily, at least with this Great Unclean One, and again, look at that stun. That stun happens, and now my Chaos Space Marines, my Tactical CSMs, as well as my Havocs are practically out of the fight. CSM, and look at how long that stun lasts. Oh, that was actually, no, not how long that stun lasts, but the Autarch stun was followed up by the Banshee stun. So again, something very, very powerful. Now, luckily, the Great Unclean One has a large health pool, so that he does not go down as quickly from those fire dragons as quickly as I had lost my dreadnoughts. But now I have to deal with both an avatar and a Wraith Lord. The Great Unclean One seems to be doing okay. Now here, what I'm trying to do is I was trying to use Warp Fire into an Imperial Abyss to take out those fire dragons. Because if I take out those fire dragons, I can at least, it would at least give me more room to use vehicles. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite successful there, and in fact, it even failed because of the fact that the hooks actually do pull retreating units in the Codex edition. They still pull in retreating units, unlike in Elite. And wow, now I have Chaos Terminators, but again, they are just getting instantly stunned by this Autarch teleporting in, and unfortunately, it looks like this is going to be the end of my Great Unclean One. Just taking too much fire. Now on the positive, let's see. Alright, so Great Unclean One is down, and FaceCommander needs to move his unit so that he does not get hit by it. At least I finally take out that Wraith Lord, although a great Unclean One for a Wraith Lord is probably a trade in FaceCommander's favor. The trade that is going in my favor is that I got a double cap out of that.
Must relocate.
Meanwhile, he's still got this Avatar.
We have 100 points remaining. It is time to add to our war panoply.
And I'm now going for a Predator. So, Sorcerer, Lord of Tzeentch. Accidental Doom Blast, because I was looking for... I don't know. I think I was just cycling through the abilities. Now, again, for some reason, these Chaos Mutants cannot worship. I don't know if that was intentional or was just an oversight, but they can't worship. But I built a shrine there. I think just because the guy Gabriel Gorguts is telling us while playing the game, I think he said something about building shrines, so I built a shrine. Here we go with a Let the Galaxy Burn. Unfortunately, seeming to miss a lot of these units. And again, we have the combination of that stun from the Autarch, just stunning my Terminators, and I'm dropping my Micro. And now we even have some Dark Reapers out on the field. They have a sniper icon. I don't even really know what they do. But they don't even seem to be doing that well, and I'm somehow winning this engagement, even though it felt like I wasn't winning that engagement. Here we have a Chaos Predator. I'm upgrading it to have Predator las cannons, turret las cannons. And I still have this Chaos Shrine of Tzeentch. And Gabriel Gorguts is telling me that worshipping cultists, he's just telling me about worship. So right here, I did not really mean to Doom Blast there, but I'm trying to go through the abilities of this unit. So, because I'm looking for worship. So the Chaos Mutants cannot worship. Now, he said that cultists can worship, so he might have meant cultists in their vanilla form. But anyway, we have a real engagement going on right here. Autarch, again, just teleporting right in, stunning the Terminator so that they can't do anything. And it's just an engagement. Focusing on the Autarch, which is probably the wrong unit to focus on. I still have the Seer Council right here, going after some units. Seer Council have actually been upgraded to have a 4th member, and Shrine will go down. Las Cannon Predator, now with Las Cannons on the sponsons as well as on the turret, is in a bad position and does get killed by the combination of that Avatar as well as the Fire Dragon. And FaceCommander went for a decap off on that middle VP, but I actually killed this Autarch in the process, and it looks like I'm going to take out the Avatar. Looks like I'm going to get very close to losing my and I do lose my Havocs to that Avatar. Very unfortunate there. Almost looked like I was going to get them out of there. But at least an Avatar, a Havoc Squad, trading a Havoc Squad for an Avatar, definitely a good trade in my favor. And I got some Banshees along with it. I guess FaceCommander's just kind of not paying attention there. And I get the double cap, and that should be enough to finish the game for me. He's coming up here. He has no choice but to go for the cap. But, you know, I've got some Let the Galaxy Burn, and I'm also throwing down an Abyss, and he pretty much just can't capture through that. So that means the game is going to go in favor of me.
A discouraging reversal.
And it actually was a reversal there, because FaceCommander was winning for the most part, but somehow I pulled it out in the end. We played a bunch of games, and he won most of them. But yeah, so hope you enjoyed the cast.